I don't know whether you want to listen to what I'm saying, friends, because if you do, I think we want to start, because we don't want to be all up very late and they have a long way to go home. It's 7:45 now. And until they come, I could just tell you what I was about to tell him. I was saying that he'd asked me about some of the places I went, and I said that I try to go to places where they don't get so many guests, because everybody likes to go to Los Angeles, New York, Greenacre, you know. But they very seldom want to go to the very small places, and they don't get visitors. They don't get the stimulation. So we went to Magdalen and Cape Breton, and to my intense disappointment, we couldn't get into Miquelon and Saint-Pierre because of the weather situation in Newfoundland, where we were flying from, and the situation there was absolutely impossible. We waited 24 hours, we couldn't get in, and they were very disappointed. There was nothing we could do about it. But the point is that in many of these small places, the Baha'is had arranged very good programs, and they'd gone an all-out effort, and I was just about to tell him, and I thought then that maybe everybody'd like to hear it. In Halifax, they had arranged a program. We were there, 3 nights, I think. Well, I'd asked for 1 day off, because every now and then I knew I'd die if I didn't have a day off. So some places I stayed 1 extra night, and then I said that day that I arrived, and perhaps the next day, depending on how tired I was, that's got to be mine to rest, and then I'll start the program. Anyway, they had 2 whole days or 3 days to make their own arrangements, and I had a day and a half of rest. And at 9 o'clock we met the deputy mayor who was running for mayor. At 10 o'clock, we met the Prime Minister of Nova Scotia. At 11 o'clock, we met the Lieutenant Governor of Nova Scotia. At 2:30, at 2 or 2:30?
You had a lunch.
Well, all right, but I had to eat after all. Then we had over half an hour's television program, televised. The Baha'is have their own television program on the air twice a week in Halifax, entirely Baha'i program. Then I went to a newspaper office, which I don't usually do, but it was late in the afternoon, and the only way they could get the article in the paper was if I went to see that reporter in the office, so I went. Then that evening was a public meeting. So you see, it's quite a lot of pressure. You get up at 7:30, and then you go right straight through till 10 o'clock at night. It was a lot. But what I'm trying to say is, look at how they profited from their opportunity. That was the thing that thrilled me. Because they're not a very big community in Halifax, like all cities. They have a small community, but they just did wonders with the whole thing. And there's a Negro where was that Negro tree planting ceremony?
That was also Nova Scotia.
That was in near Halifax. There is a Negro Cultural Center that they're building, which is evidently a very unique thing. They've been a very deprived community, and they had succeeded in getting this land, and getting grants and subsidies, and raising money amongst themselves, a poor working population. And hello, Mish, come here. I haven't seen you at all. Please, come sit here, my dear.
Everybody knows.
At last I see you. I was going to telephone you, and then Farhad said you were coming, so I thought I'd speak to you. Anyway, the point is that they'd arranged for me to plant a tree as a gift of the Baha'is for this cultural center that they were building. And they'd never had a guest before. You see, they never had anybody pay any attention to them, in the sense that wanting to go and plant a tree, and it was covered by the television news broadcast, and it was covered by newspapers. And, of course, there were very few people there, but the point is they did it, you see. This is the thing that was so wonderful, is they made that effort. Really, the Baha'is are marvelous. I don't know whether I have enough of these to go around. I thought I had more, but I don't seem to find them. This is a quotation from Baha'u'llah. It's in this new book. Hello, Arnold. Well, look at Mitchell. Michael, I mean. Hello, welcome. Hello, Stuart.
Hello, Michael. How are you?
There is room here, still in the front.
There's another seat here, you know.
They can't see you as well if they sit here, isn't it?
Oh, well, they don't have to see me. Big help.
You kind of want to sit here so everybody can see better.
Somebody else must be arriving because the dog, to be fair to the dog, only barks when something really is happening.
Unlike others.
Oh, I'm sorry. Nothing personal. I had remembered at that point you would have done. No, that was not the thing. There we are. Hey, give it a show. There we are. Anyway, this is a quotation which you'll find in The Desire of the World. And I can give one to different families, and you can always have a Xerox copy made. I thought it was wonderful to quote in connection with the persecutions. Religious fanaticism and hatred are a world-devouring fire whose violence none can quench. You know, there's so many things in the writings of Baha'u'llah that, at least I don't know about other people, I can't take it all in. And then you find extraordinary statements, you see, that's only 3 lines. And it's unbelievably powerful. So I'll give one to each family. I'll give one to the family down at the other end of the line, Cap. I'll give one to you, your family. And I gave Greg one, or you can get one copy anyway. Which family are you? You're the whole family. You're Stuart. You're Stuart.
Oh my
Can I give it to you? The man of the family, you share it with your wife and your brother-in-law. I'll give it to you as the man of the family. I don't hear too much in the television.
You're the man of May I have one?
She's coming.
I think Arnold should get one of his own.
What?
I think Arnold should get one of his own.
I don't get one. Well, I have enough. I'll give him. This is you and Joe. No, I only have one left. You didn't get one. No, you can make copies of it. I'm sorry. I thought I had more, but I can't spend the time now to look for them. Anyway. I can't see you, Stuart.
She's coming here. You're coming.
Are you comfortable here, dear? Okay. You wouldn't be more comfortable on the sofa with your back against something? Well, you know how you like to sit. Well, who's chairman? I think we make Greg chairman. It's his house.
What am I expected to do?
You're expected to get the friends to pray. A reasonable prayer at the beginning, I suppose.
Ouvre la porte. Fournis les moyens. Fais que le sentier soit sûr et trace le chemin. Afin que nous puissions être guidés vers ces âmes dont tu as préparé les cœurs pour ta cause. Et puissent-elles être guidées vers nous. En vérité, tu es le fort et le puissant.
You know, in principle, that we don't have any distinction between the Baha'is. I mean, the Baha'is, and whether they're the people of the country or the pioneers or whoever they are, it's all the same thing. We're all Baha'is together. But I think that particularly in countries like Haiti, where the pioneers are carrying so much of the burden of the progress of the faith, and there's no denying that they are doing it. Everybody knows it, and the people of the country know it too and are grateful for it. And the House of Justice knows it, you see. So that to me, under those circumstances, to meet especially with the pioneers is a perfectly logical thing to do. Because I can say things and make suggestions and answer questions that I couldn't possibly do if it were a general meeting of the villagers and of different peoples. It wouldn't be possible to do that if we weren't all together talking about the problems and the possibilities. And I think the value of our being together, aside from the pleasure of seeing each other, which is a real pleasure for me, is that we can discuss things and bring out thoughts and make any suggestions that we have. I'm sure you want to know, and I won't perhaps be able to bring this out tomorrow in the meeting with all of the friends. I've had a very, very wonderful experience here in Haiti. I love Haiti, and I think that the whole occasion of being with the villagers has been one of the happiest things that's happened to me in many, many years, because it reminds me of Africa. It brings back some glorious moments of my life when I was able to go out and teach in the villages and able to meet the people. And I think that it has made me so fond of this country that really for 2 cents I'd come and live here. I can't, obviously, because of my age and my responsibilities and my home at the World Center and everything else. But really for 2 cents I wouldn't mind in the least living in this country. And I feel that way about very, very few countries in the world that I'd care to live in. I mean, I'm always happy to be with the people and can adjust myself pretty well to any country. But I don't have the same feeling about other countries as I have about 1 or 2 of them. And I think this is a very, very exceptional country. And I don't know why it's so exceptional, but I think it is. I think the people are a very fine people. I think they're unusually clean, courteous, intelligent, very kindly. You go to the villages, the things that you see, when you're down here in Port-au-Prince and cadeau, this attitude they have towards tourists. There's none of that. Very, very seldom in the countryside. The people are absolutely dignified and self-respecting and receptive, and as I say, a very intelligent and courteous people, very handsome people. And of course, to me, it's one of the most beautiful countries I've been in many, many years. And I'm surprised that nobody ever talks about the sheer scenic beauty of Haiti. I don't know whether people don't look at it or they don't notice it, but I've never heard people rave about the beauty of Haiti. But I can tell you that in my travels, this is an exceptionally beautiful country. Just to look at the mountains and the valleys and the inlets and the whole thing, and to look at the stars at night. My goodness, the other night we came out of a meeting in one of these villages, and everything was absolutely jet black. And I raised my head, and for the first time in years I could see the stars. They were all hanging right over my head, you see. It was absolutely glorious. You can't see the stars in Haifa anymore. And of course, obviously, in none of the big cities of the world do you ever see the stars anymore. You've forgotten there are stars. But here you can actually see the heavens again. Anyway, it's been a very wonderful experience. Now, if I were going to live in Haiti, I'll tell you where I would live. I would live between Cap and when you start coming down to Gonaïves, in that part where it's still very tropical, and all those gorgeous trees. It's lush. I love tropical vegetation. And the lushness of the countryside on that side is so much greater than on this side. Here it's more arid, obviously, they have less rain and so on. But it's just a lovely, lovely part of the world. And while I'm on the subject of praising Haiti, I would like to say that I think that the pioneers here, particularly those that have children, have an opportunity to pay much more attention to the diet and care of their children than they do in North America or in Europe. I mean, even if you go to health food shops, if you're conscious of nutrition, if you're conscious of the values in food that are good for your health and good for your children, there's not too much you can do about it. You know, Violette and I lived for 5 months in Toronto, and we kept house. We had an apartment, and we kept house and did our own cooking and marketing and so on. And they have these marvelous vegetable markets. And I was in there one day. We were buying groceries and things to cook, and I heard the sound of violently running water, like a hose in a garden. So I turned around, and this fellow was hosing these banks of vegetables, cauliflowers and beans and lettuce and spinach and so on. And I turned to him and I said, "My dear man, don't you realize you're destroying every single food value by soaking these things? Because when you wet vegetables, you leach out all the vitamins." And I said, "You're destroying all the food value in that stuff." Why, he said, "Madam, if we didn't do that, we would lose about 75% of what we're trying to sell." So the heck with anything that's left of a food value in it. God knows where it came from in the first place, or when it was picked, or how fresh it is, or how much it was sprayed. Don't know anything about that, you see. So that just that one thing that you can go out here and buy, maybe it's not the kind of a vegetable that you have in your mind, but you can buy a perfectly nice, clean, fresh vegetable that was picked this morning, and that is very good for you to eat, and especially for your children to eat, you see. When we were in the mountains, of course, I enjoy the countries that I'm staying in. The first thing I did was to buy a scoop down in the iron market here, and I took that with me, and we had a number of meals in hotels where we opened a can of beans, because we had no choice, obviously, or we boiled a couple of eggs, and then I had my nice little wooden bowl, and we could have our salad in that, and we had our knives and our forks and our pepper and our salt and our oil and our vinegar, and we could make a little salad and have something to eat in our bedroom, which we've done very often in many countries. But then I had a gourd that I bought. The gourd is the only one of two that I saw that had a handle. She'd made it like a basket, a great big gourd. So I got very excited over that. I bought the gourd. Well, I've had a number of baths out of that gourd, because I can't stand ice cold water. And a number of the places where we spent the night, the water was just like ice, and I don't like it. And I'm not willing to submit to it if I can help it. So we have a little tiny electric coffee, heater or water heater, and one little jug like that, divided half for the first gourd of ice water and half for the second gourd of ice water with my scoop. I had a lovely tepid bath every night, you see. But my point is that you have such fun. There's such fascinating possibilities in even living in a country like this. There's so many crafts. There's so many gorgeous baskets. There's so many wood carvings that you like. You can just buy yourself something that is charming. You can buy yourself any kind of a craft thing. I bought all these little bone dishes. I'm taking them back to different friends in Haifa, and bone boxes. And Violette and I have practically a whole series of these little cow horn bone dishes with our jewelry in them, our hairpins in it, our lipsticks in it, and we enjoy these things. These are the things of the country. They're inexpensive and they're full of charm. But what I'm trying to say is that you can get the maize. You go and buy the maize. You can make cornbread. You can have porridge. You can have cornmeal mush. You can have all kinds of things. You go and buy this roll of stuff. What someone told us what you call this stuff. Who was it? Yes, you remember. That roll
Sugar.
of like molasses that we bought when we were near Ash?
The brown sugar.
Remember that roll of brown sugar, Arnold, that we bought?
Rabadou.
Yes, well, it's delicious, you see. And we bought that, and we got Ed's cook to boil it down so as to be sure it didn't have too many bugs in it, because obviously you don't know how it has been prepared, if it had any insects in it. And now we've got a gorgeous thing of the most delicious molasses you ever tasted in your whole life. But my point is that the possibilities, just from the standpoint of living here, especially, as I say, if you have children, to me, I think anybody that can live here is lucky. Now, maybe it's hard for some people. It's so different from North America. They don't have all the luxuries that they are used to. I know lots of people that come to serve at the World Center, they get all upset because the supermarket isn't like the supermarket at home, you know, and so on. But that's just childishness. But it's a wonderful country, and the people are such lovely people, as I said. They're so clean. It impressed me that this population is an extraordinarily clean population. You watch the people, they're spotless. I mean, people come along in it, never mind the school children that are so beautifully dressed in these school uniforms. They just look like a bunch of flowers going down the street. But the actual people are so scrubbed. Their clothes are shining. Even if the clothes are old and faded, they are so clean that they're just sparkling, you see. All over the country, you see the people constantly washing themselves and washing their clothes. So that, to me, it's been a revelation to be able to go back into the countryside in Haiti in depth and to get a little idea of what the actual people are like. And they're a very, very lovely people. And I think that there's a tremendous possibility of teaching them the faith. Now, one of the things that I feel very strongly is that although there's been an immense progress made during the last 2 years since I was here, and I think you owe this mainly to the Continental Board of Councillors and to Dr. Farhad, who's been coming here, Arbab, I mean, who's been coming here, who is really a very knowledgeable man, a very lovely Baha'i, and is used to the mass teaching in South America, you see. So he's very properly, as far as I can see from my short period here, analyzed how he could get at helping in depth to fulfill the plan of the House of Justice in this country, and he's got these teams working. And people have different areas. And they go out pioneers and they go out Haitians. Usually it's the pioneers that have the car. And of course the Haitians have the knowledge of their own people, and they have their own Creole language, which they speak so much better than any of the pioneers. But this is wonderful. And so much is happening that, as I said the other day, if I had known the progress that had been made here in the last 2 years, I really sincerely think I might not have come back. Because I came back, because when I was here before, nothing was happening, and I was upset over it. And I remembered poor old Hector saying, well, why doesn't anybody ever come up to Ash? You go this way and that way, but nobody ever comes and teaches in my area. And there's a lot of receptivity there. And this went to my heart and stuck in my mind, and I thought, well, I'm going back. And I'm going to go to Ash, where Hector is, and I'm going to see if I can help him attract villagers in his area, you see. So as I say, if I'd known how much progress you were making, having an awful lot of work to do, particularly this year myself, and tired after all of this long trip that I've just made, I probably would have skipped Haiti. I would have said, all right, you know, I miss Haiti. And I'm sorry I can't go, but I've got other things to do, and Haiti's getting on all right. They don't need me, you see. But I didn't know that, and I came, and it's been a very wonderful experience for me. But I have a very definite impression that although the teams are going back to these places and helping to sustain the communities where they have spiritual assemblies. At the same time, they are not doing enough enrolling of new believers. This is my feeling. Now, maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. Unfortunately, none of the board members are here tonight. Linda's mother's arrived, and Joe, I suppose, is babysitting. It's about time. Let you come out for once. And Renee is down in the town. And I haven't been able to say anything to them, but there's nothing secret about it. I just feel that there is not enough enrollment going on of new people. You know, when Shoghi Effendi, it's a very difficult balance. And all of us Baha'is get sidetracked. Maybe because we're not so extraordinary anyway, and we're naive, and we're over-sincere, and trying very hard. But whatever the reason may be for what we do, I think that we get sidetracked on some particular theme that either we think that's more important or it captures our imagination, or we get all busy on it and forget the other aspect. But Shoghi Effendi, when mass conversion, as you know, began in Uganda before he died. And if you have visited Shoghi Effendi's resting place, you know there's this globe on top. And the continent of Africa faces you. As you look at the monument of the Guardian, the writing, and the eagle, the front of the globe is the continent of Africa. And the Persians didn't like it very much. And sometimes they said to me, but why, Khánum, didn't you put Asia, the cradle of the faith, you see, the place of all the martyrs and so on? And I gave them a very straight answer. I said, because Africa was the continent that brought joy to the heart of Shoghi Effendi before he died. And it deserved to be there because that's the place that he was made happy before he passed away, which was true, because of the mass conversion. Now, they began to teach up in the north of Uganda, about 200 miles from the capital city, in the Teso district. It's a very long story, I can't go into it now. And they had, I think, the first 200 Baha'is, wasn't it? And they informed Shoghi Effendi that they had 200 African Baha'is in the Teso district, and he was absolutely thrilled. And he informed the whole Baha'i world. Well, to make a long story short, before he died, it reached 2,000. And the enthusiasm of these new Baha'is was just like a running fire in the grass. You never saw anything like it. Then the pioneers, way off in Uganda, in Kampala, they got scared. We said, all of these people are coming in, hundreds of people, what are we going to do with them? They don't know anything about the faith. Their ancestors weren't martyrs, and they haven't been third and fourth generation Baha'is, and so on. And they got frightened. They said, we have to consolidate. So they stopped this wave of teaching, just like a tidal wave, and they hung on to the tail of the thing and said, now we have to deepen them in the faith and we have to consolidate, you see. And Shoghi Effendi didn't get any news. And he got very distressed, and he cabled and asked why he wasn't getting news of new enrollments. Well, anyway, to make a long story short, some of the pioneers came at that period to the Pilgrim House table. There were pilgrims in Haifa, and he pointed out to them that it was very dangerous, that they must never stop the teaching work. That whatever they did, they must never stop the teaching work. It must go on. All right, you go behind the wave of new enrollments, and you do the best you can to deepen and consolidate. And eventually you do deepen and consolidate, but it's all a question of relativity, you see. But he was very distressed when he found that this had been arrested for a period so they could consolidate, and he said they must never do this. Now, the interesting thing is that in that area in Uganda where mass conversion began in the Baha'i faith, in the sense that we would call it mass conversion, except dozens or something, 20s or 30s or whatever it was here and there, they never recaptured the momentum. Never. They did something to it. I don't know how to describe it, like a baby being born. You can't arrest the process of the baby being born, you know, and say, well, wait a minute now, we're not quite ready, just hang around for a while and we'll go on with this a little bit later on. It doesn't work that way, you see. And this is what they tried to do. And from that day to this, they never recaptured the momentum in that part of Uganda, because you mustn't stop a thing like that. Now, if there's going to be the entry by troops, if there is going to be a Baha'i world order, if we're going to have Baha'i teachings incorporated in society, because really the whole of the practical side of the teachings, I mean, aside from prayer and the moral principles and living the life and so on, all of the Baha'i teachings require society to implement them. They're not something that we just implement, a few of us here and there in our families. That's the personal side. But the whole revelation of Baha'u'llah is to create a society, a new world order. Well, you can't do that without millions of people, you see. So you can't not bring in people into the faith constantly. Now, obviously, that's going to create a lot of problems. What are we going to do, for instance, if suddenly, for reasons that we can't foresee, 1,000 people in Montreal want to become Baha'is tomorrow? They say, well, all right, we want to be Baha'is. Oh, whatever it is, we believe it. Let us in. What are you going to do? Say, go away? We don't think that you're fitted for it, or we're going to start a series of study classes. Wait a while till we get around to starting one in your neighborhood, and then we'll see whether we think you are worthy to be admitted into the faith of Baha'u'llah. Then the next manifestation of God will come after at least 1,000 years, and we won't have any Baha'i society established, because we won't have had the bulk of the human race become Baha'is. Now, every step forward creates problems, there's no doubt about it. But in my whole life, and my faith also tells me, that every time there are problems in the cause solves the problems, you see, because it is the cause of God. So you must never be afraid of the problems that may arise. You or I can't foresee how we would meet many things that could happen. We say, well, what about our manpower? But what about our possibilities? But how? They don't know anything about the faith. What kind of Baha'is are they going to be? What kind of administrators? Well, that's not our problem. If we, each of us, do what is our possibility, and that's why I like to talk to the pioneers, because that's why they came here, was because they wanted to do what was possible for them to help the faith progress in Haiti, pure and simple, you see. If we each do our part, the doors will open for other problems to be solved. And I think that we have to have the confidence to understand that. I mean, I can remember as a girl, for instance, wondering, how would we ever get a Baha'i ruler into the faith? Ooh, if you think that it's only your generation that sits down and does metaphysical hair splitting, you should have heard us in Montreal 50 years ago. We're doing the same thing, you see. Well, if we do that, and how would they be enrolled, and how would they do, and who's control, and woo, and politics and non-politics and God knows what. Well, what happens? The Malietoa, the king of Samoa, is taught by individual Baha'i family who knew him, and he accepts the faith. What does the House of Justice do? They just lean across into the Pacific Ocean and grab him. And he's never been ungrabbed from that day to this. He is in the palm of the hand of the House of Justice. All decisions concerning the Malietoa are not anything to do with the councilors, the National Assembly, nothing. House of Justice. It's on an entirely different level. They have fostered this man. They have brought him up in the faith. He has a love for the House of Justice and a confidence in it that very few Baha'is have. How did he get it? First of all, Sohail Alawi taught him, who's a rock, a very wonderful person. And second, the House of Justice sent very prominent Baha'is, very selected Baha'is, various hands of the cause mainly, to go all the way to Samoa to see him specially. Not anybody, but special ones to bring him up in his knowledge and understanding of the faith. In the beginning, he didn't really want to let on that he was a Baha'i. And now he just stands up openly and says, I'm a Baha'i, and the whole of his people know it, you see. So it's a tremendous thing. Well, who did it? The House of Justice did it, and it's done on an entirely different level. So here you had what to our little minds would have been a terrific problem. Oh, what do we do with the ruler and this and that and the other thing? And the House of Justice just takes the whole thing and lifts it up and solves the whole problem. There isn't any problem. He's not under the National Assembly. It has nothing to do with him. It doesn't consult him, and he doesn't consult it. And Baha'is arrive there, and they say, oh, can we go and see the Maliato? And the answer is, no, you can't. He's a king. He's busy, and you can't go and see him. Cause has solutions. As the problem arises, the cause will solve the problem. Now, we're given the guidance by the House of Justice what to do. Another extremely peculiar thing, if you think about it in our religion, and I've thought about it over and over and over, it's really mind-shattering. You have to go out, I mean, you don't have to, but you should or could go out and teach the cause of God to other people. Well, I think that in 20 minutes, my personal conviction is that you can pretty well outline the whole of the Baha'i faith in 20 minutes. You can tell them what progressive revelation is. You can place Baha'u'llah historically. You can take the present state of the world. You can take the answer to the needs of the new state of the world in the teachings of Baha'u'llah. You can tell them that we believe in the life after death and the power of prayer and this and that and the other thing. You can pretty well, without going into all the details, convey the whole Baha'i religion in 20 minutes to half an hour. Then supposing that person, either intellectually or instinctively through their heart, wants to accept it, you have to accept him, because that's in the teachings too. The House of Justice has made that clear. This is what's happening in the villages all over the world, you see. They say, I want to be a Baha'i. We say, come along, you're welcome. You want to be a Baha'i? You think you really understand this is from God for this day? Yalla, come on. We'd be very happy to welcome you and to enroll you, you see. Then what happens? The moment you've got 9 adults on April the 21st, you have to elect a spiritual assembly. You can't say, I don't consider that they are not mature enough to have their spiritual assembly. Because it says whenever you have 9 adult Baha'is, you have to form the spiritual assembly, which of course, as I say, is practically brain-shattering. Because they don't know anything and they don't know how to function and so on, you see. Well then, there must be a reason for it. If this is what we are supposed to do, then we better have confidence in it and do it to the best of our ability. Then you come to the state of the development of the people. One of the things that has irritated me in the last 25 years since Shoghi Effendi passed away, and I've been traveling so much, is that the Baha'is consider that new Baha'is should be mature. Now, we're not the least surprised that she has to take that little baby over there on her knee, and that the other child is only 4 or whatever his age is. And we don't expect him to react the way a child of 10 would, or 12, or 15, or an adult. We don't even remotely expect him. We say he's little. He's a child. He's a baby. How can you expect him to be other than he is at this age, you see? But we haven't this much understanding of baby Baha'is. This is the thing that always astonishes me. It doesn't surprise us that the human race should be, babies and little children, and then bigger, and then adolescents, and then grow up. We're perfectly used to that. But we have no patience with our Baha'i babies. They've just come into the cause. How can they be, unless they're very, very mature spiritually and exceptional people, how can they be considered adult? How can you expect them to bear the weight of responsibility on their little backs when they're so young and so tender in the faith? And this has always astonished me with the Baha'is, because we really actually demand that perfectly inexperienced new Baha'is, even say they've read a couple of books or something, we expect them to be like us and to bear the same responsibility with as much or as little knowledge as we have, as we are bearing. And it's a very, very unfair thing. It's a very unreasonable attitude. So that it seems to me, as I started out to say, that my feeling here is that you're doing exactly what you can do and should do with this team teaching. I think it's wonderful. I think it's very important. But I think that when the teams go out, whatever else they're doing, and I don't know exactly what they do, that they should at the same time make it possible to, if they come on the fringe of another area, or there's another village a little bit beyond that, or there are people in the meeting, is always, every meeting in this part of the world and in the whole of Africa and Asia is always full of non-Baha'is. People who, in theory you're going to have a meeting with the Baha'is, but have you ever had one with just the Baha'is? Of course not. Half the audience is all non-Baha'is. You can't say, get out, you're not a Baha'i, where's your card, or I won't let you in under the tree or something. That's perfectly ridiculous. So they're welcome to come in. And then you have to start teaching them too, you see. So, all right, if you're going to have to teach them, you might just as well see if some of them want to become Baha'is and enroll them. But our experience, the places that we have been to, was that here in Haiti, we found in the villages, I'm not talking about the members of the National Assembly or the community here in Port-au-Prince, I'm talking about out in the villages, remarkably mature and devoted Baha'is. Really, people that obviously, with my experience of the believers all over the world, are obviously really reliable, devoted Baha'is of capacity, you see. Now, they may have been Baha'is 4 years and had very little help and deepening. They may have been Baha'is 4 months, and the same thing would apply. But you have that caliber of Baha'is here. And it's been very, very revealing to me and immensely encouraging to meet people like that. So that I think that obviously the faith all over the world is standing on the threshold of something entirely different. And here in Haiti, it's doing exactly the same thing. So that I think you have tremendous events ahead of you. I think you've turned a big corner here in Haiti. The opening of that school, the fact that the president sent his representative, that the ministers, one of them came, that the people of importance from different ministries were present, that it was reported on the news, you see. All of this is a tremendous turning point in the history of the faith in Haiti. And then you have all of these communities that are beginning to develop and to come up, you see. I made some notes about things I wanted to say. Another impression that I had a couple of suggestions to make of a concrete kind, aside from what I've just said. I wish to God that the Baha'is, I don't care who they are, but if the pioneers, who are in this room anyway, are going to go out and teach, for goodness sake, make it a point of teaching people that the purpose of speech is to be heard. You know, I'm tired of going to Baha'i meetings where one of the Baha'is, maybe a Baha'i of 50 years standing, maybe a very distinguished Baha'i, is asked to read a prayer, and they say, oh my God, well, maybe she can hear it, but you can't hear it. What am I bothering to read it out loud for? Let me hand you a prayer book. You read to yourself and I'll read to myself. The purpose of speech is to be heard. And I've noticed in some of these meetings, I've said to the children, speak up. Make it possible for people to hear what you're saying. And you know that did you remember some of these tiny things, 7 and 8 years old, the next time they raised their voice and spoke louder so you could hear them at the back of the room, a little tiny child would take this instruction into their minds, and you tell adults and they still go on mumbling in their beards. And I think that the Baha'is should call this to the attention of the villagers. They don't even know it. Occasionally you get somebody with a beautiful, lots of them read the prayers in these meetings we've been having in the villages. Every now and then you get somebody who actually projects their voice so that everybody in the room can hear the word of God. But otherwise they sit there and what are you praying for? Forget it. And that's one of the things I think we should teach the friends. Another thing that I think that all of the Baha'i teachers, and now I'm naturally talking to people in this room, I think that you must call to the attention of whoever it may be, whether it happens to be a Haitian or a traveling teaching or a teacher or one of yourselves, that you must not teach the faith by don'ts. I was very surprised in one of the meetings. One of the Haitian Baha'is got up and was talking about the faith and very nicely and said, but drinking is forbidden in the Baha'i faith. You have no right to say that. You see, you have actually no right to say that because you can't make it a condition of membership. And that's in writing from Shoghi Effendi. What you can make a condition of enrollment is you believe in the Bab as the forerunner, Baha'u'llah as the manifestation of God, Amatu'l Bahá as the exemplar, and the present day administrative order. And you can try and convey that. And as I say, if you can't convey that in 20 minutes, then you shouldn't be a Baha'i yourself. Because it's very simple. You can easily convey it in 20 minutes. All right, and then they have a right to accept if they believe in it and feel it's the right thing. Of course, if the person is dead drunk, or a bum, or somebody that's looking for a handout, you will try not to let them be enrolled, you see. But normally, if a person then wants to become a Baha'i, you enroll them, and you can't tell them that they can't have 2 wives, that they mustn't commit adultery because it's not looked upon with favor in the Baha'i religion, that they're not allowed to drink because it's the law of Baha'u'llah, they mustn't take hashish because that's the law of Baha'u'llah, and so you can't add all those things to it, you see. All those come gradually with the process of deepening the person who has been accepted into the faith. And I think that you must make that clear, that in teaching the faith, they must not begin with all the don'ts, but just begin with the glory of the teachings of Baha'u'llah and what he's come into the world to do and to accomplish, and do you want to be a part of it, and doesn't it seem to you to be perhaps the truth? And if they say yes, then say, come on, you're welcome. If you want to come in, you see. But not then, of course, you have to go on and help them to a deeper understanding. But if they will understand, which after all is the crux of the whole thing, that this is from Almighty God, and that Baha'u'llah is the mouthpiece of God, therefore what he says is correct, and that he's brought the solution for the problems of this age and for, say, 1,000 years. Now, if they accept that, then when you come and say, but this one whom you have accepted is coming from God, tells you that for your own good, you see, you mustn't drink, or for your own good, you mustn't take drugs. For your own good, you must try and live a good moral life and have good moral behavior and so on. You see, then you begin to teach them that this is what Baha'u'llah wants you to be like, and you help them. That is deepening. I don't think that deepening is how many seconds you are permitted to raise your right hand to vote. I wouldn't call that deepening, would you? In other words, all these little trivialities, this isn't deepening. Nor is it deepening, frankly, in the United States of America or anywhere else. Just nonsense. Well, that seems to be the end for the moment of my impressions.
What's the other side?
No, that's those are things I want to call to the attention of the National Assembly suggestions. Well, some of them can be discussed on more than one occasion, nothing private about them. But I don't know whether, I don't even know who, if anybody in this room is concerned with it. I've never seen the Baha'i News of Haiti. I mean, I know we have it at the World Center, but then I don't see anything except the International Baha'i Newsletter because I'm too busy or I'm traveling, one or the other. But I have, for a long time, thought, now I don't know whether it would apply here or not, frankly, but I know it would have applied, say, amongst the Indians of Bolivia or Peru. Whether it applies with this population, I don't know, because I haven't got the experience to know. But I've often thought that if the National Assembly could send out a newsletter of even one sheet of very simple news to the Baha'is, and then either on the back of that same sheet, or alternatively 2 sheets of paper, translations from the teachings, that if they could get something like that in their hands once every 19 days, in other words, the 19 Baha'i months, first of all, they'd be reminded that there is such a thing as a Baha'i month. And then that loose piece of paper, they can be encouraged to build up their reading material, you see, because they haven't anything in hand. Now, another thing that I'd like to ask if anybody can answer, my impression is, just from the meetings that I've been having and listening to my translations by different people, that the dialect is quite different, for instance, in Cap from in Lekai, and this side, you see. Well, what are you doing to meet the need? I don't know what the National Assembly is doing. I'm going to ask them tomorrow when I have a chance to talk to them. But what are the Baha'is here doing to meet that need? Are they sitting down, wasting their whole blasted existence on whether this professor's Creole is better than that professor's, or this committee's decision is better than that committee's? I know all of these things. All over the world, you will come to a country where the Baha'is are dying to have something in their own dialect, and they're not getting it because the government can't agree on which dialect it's going to use, or the Baha'is themselves can't agree whether A dialect is better than B dialect, so they don't do anything at all. And the Baha'is don't get anything to read of the Word of God in their own language. And I think that this is of tremendous importance, that people should have every month, if it were me, if it could be done, a sheet of paper with some of the hidden words, some of the prayers, some of the apposite and important teachings. God knows it's been beautifully and simply stated in the Baha'i writings, in their own form of Creole. If you can find a Creole that is more or less understood by the whole nation, all right, go ahead and send it out in that. If you can't, then surely the Baha'is in Lekai area should be able to do something comparable so that the people in their village district are getting something that they can read in their own language and understand. We have letters from Shoghi Effendi, because people were, perfectionists just as much then as they are now, and they would say, oh, but we want to have it perfect, and the translation is very bad, and that old translation made by Martha Root, the professors at the Sorbonne or something or other, don't consider that it is good, and it's a pity that we should debase the teachings into bad language, and so on. Shoghi Effendi said all of this can be bettered in the future. The important thing is to get the writings into the hands of the new Baha'is so they can read it. You want them to be deepened, but what are you doing to help them to be deepened? You're splitting a lot of metaphysical hairs. I don't mean you. I mean a lot of people all over the world in comparable situations who often are not of the country, often pioneers, are being precisionists and fussing and stewing, and the man in the village still hasn't anything to read in his own language, you see. Now, Ed told me and Susan that in their area, some of the students that Ed has been contacted in the university have accepted the faith, and this very nice girl, Suzette, isn't that her name, who is a school teacher, have been doing some translations into Creole. Well, you don't have to publish a great big tome in fancy print. All you have to do is to mimeograph some material that they have translated. All right, let the National Assembly say Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. It doesn't matter. But just let's get it out to the people, you see. Let them have something so that they get the spiritual nourishment. And that would be one of the most active forms, you might say, of deepening. Is another thing that I feel that they should be doing here in Haiti. Now, mind you, I don't know what you're doing, you see. I've met with the National Assembly for 1 hour, and that was all. And how do I know what you're doing? But these are my reactions to this trip and some of the thoughts that I have on the subject. And I think also, I didn't have the impression, and if any of you can correct me, I'd be very grateful. I didn't get the impression, but it doesn't mean that I'm right, that the local believers know that they should be teaching and enrolling Baha'is. Now, what's the name of this place? Hector.
Yes.
What's the name of that? No, that village. Tomasi.
Yeah.
Well, there's a very fine Baha'i there. Do you remember his name? Yes, all right. He was so excited because he had 3 or 4 enrollments after the meeting. And he knew exactly what he was doing. He was a well-educated man. Was he the school teacher?
He was a minister for a while, or prefect for a while.
Well, all right, he's an educated man.
Very.
And he was absolutely tickled to death. And he got a hold of these people that said they wanted to become enrolled, and he filled out their cards and told them where to sign it and gave them the 3 places and said 1 is for you, 1 for the NSA, 1 for the local assembly. And he was absolutely delighted, you see. You could see the way the man leapt at this opportunity of enrolling new people and having them enter the faith of God, you see. Now, you ought to get more people doing that. Maybe you have. I don't know. I'm not one of your teams. I don't know what you're all doing. But that's what you should be doing. Well, now I've made my speeches. Now, if anybody wants to discuss different points or bring out different points, I'd be delighted. Maybe you can answer some of my questions.
Well, I think there was the question about the peace letter.
Yes.
There is a bulletin being published.
How often does it go out?
No, Julie could answer these questions.
Not every 2 months,
And how big is it?
up to 25, 26 pages.
Well, you see, Jillian, I haven't seen it. And I dare say that it's a very comprehensive thing. But I'm wondering whether 19 sheets of paper printed on both sides wouldn't be better for the villages than 25 sheets 3 times or 4 times a year. You see what I'm getting at? Because I don't know whether they're readers. You see, lots of people will, even I tell you, I'm appalled nowadays. When somebody hands me 25 sheets of paper, I nearly faint. My whole life is being snowed on with pieces of paper. I hate the sight of a piece of paper. Well, of course, they're not in that position, but the point is that maybe 25 sheets of paper jammed full of information in very good French is too much for them. I think it would be perhaps better if they could get it in smaller and more easily assimilated doses. And as I said, something that would be specifically a sheet where they would be told by the traveling teachers and their local assemblies and whoever it is, their national assembly naturally, in its own bulletin, that if you save this, you will be building up some very precious things to memorize and to teach from, which you will have in your own home. This will be the beginning of your own little Baha'i book.
This suggestion has come from the National. It's been talked about several times. And more recently, it was decided that the National Teaching Committee would be asked to do something like
Like that. Well, you see, that answers my question. That makes me very happy. Because I think that they're hungry. They'd be delighted, some of them. Of course, some of them, in any kind of a piece of paper, may not be much use to them. And then, of course, you have the problem here, the way you have in so many countries of the world, of getting the piece of paper to the villager. That's a terrific thing. There's no rural delivery, there's no post office, there's nothing.
But it will not be that difficult because there is always a Baha'i or a pioneer coming from different places,
Yes,
who could take them and bring them home and distribute over there.
Well, the teaching teams usually go at least minimum once a month, so there would be some
Yes.
there, distribution there.
An interesting thing too, if we can reduce the 25 pages, let's say, to 5 pages, so with the same amount of money we can print more bulletins.
Yes, but you see, if you don't mind my saying so, I have had a vast experience. For 16 years I was Shoghi Effendi's secretary. I've lived at the World Center 45 years. Since the teaching center was formed, I've been on it. So I must have had quite a lot of experience. And my observation is that we Baha'is, of our category, educated Baha'is, highly civilized, if you want to, urbans, I don't know what you want to call us, anything, our kind of Baha'i. We have an attitude that we should bring those villages up to our standard. So we patronize them with things that we understand and which they don't understand. And we think they should, and we think we should, as I say, raise them to our standard by giving them materials which they don't know how to handle or assimilate. Instead of saying our duty is to see that that little child gets what it needs because it's only 4 years old, we say, oh no, the child now, I'm going to treat him just as if he were 20 years old. I'm going to ignore the fact he's only 4. That's nonsense. He can pretend he's 20. Well, he can't. None of his functions are 20-year-old functions.
When you returned from the north here, when you were talking about your radio programs in Cap-Haïtien and how valuable you thought using radio.
Well, I want to go into this very, very seriously. And I don't know why I shouldn't talk about it here. I want to talk about it to the National Assembly. I'm going to talk about it to the House of Justice. I'm going to write a report to the councillors and send it to our Bob. He can share it with whom he pleases. I consider that it's really, with the possibilities in Haiti of small radio stations, it's almost inconceivable that somehow or other, somewhere in this country, we can't begin to have broadcasts. Now, again, the Baha'is always want to do something on an idealistic scale, way up here. Well, all right, you've got a school. You have to run the school on a scale way up here because it's an educational institution. But if you could just lease time on the radio. Who was it told me that $60 a month? Who was told that? Ed said that they had an opportunity for $60 a month to have, what was it, 3 hours a day?
No, 7 minutes a day, 7 days a week.
How many hours?
49 minutes a week.
All right, 50 minutes a week. You mean 50 minutes total a week?
A week, yes.
Well, all right, forget the details. Supposing that you have, I know, let's back up a minute. When I was, I wasn't there, but this developed afterwards. We saw that Paraguay had a budget of about, I think, $1,200 a year for many years. I don't know whether we're still doing that or whether it's gone further than that. They bought time on the radio for that, which just saturated the country with Baha'i programs. Why build a radio station? Why send somebody in there, technician, to run it? You see what I mean? You have to have housing and salary and support them, and they have to live there, and you have to be sure they'll stay with it. When for a very nominal sum, you can rent the facilities, you see. Now, why you're not doing that, because certainly the money would be forthcoming immediately. Why you're not doing it, I presume, is because you haven't got the material.
Among other things, yes.
Well, all right, but you've got lots of know-how in the Baha'i faith. You get a hold of a bunch of tapes. One of these, I spoke on 3 radio stations in Cap. There was only one I didn't, I think I gave out or something, or they weren't there, it was raining or something. But anyway, 3 out of 4 I spoke. Well, one of them was like a dog kennel. Here was a fellow sitting here, and he had piles of tape all around him and ghastly noises going all the time, and he had a little mic in front of him, and he just kept shoving these things over the air, you see. He'd take this tape and shove that on, and this tape, and he'd make an announcement of a paid advertisement and so on. Well, it's as simple as ABC, but why shouldn't we Baha'is make a collection? You've got loads of people. You've got people like Greg, who's interested in this kind of thing, and many Baha'is who are knowledgeable in this field. Find out what kind of music would be new so that they want to listen to the Baha'i program. I don't know whether the people here would like the Negro spirituals. They're in English, but the voices and Fisk Jubilee singers. Have you ever heard anything like them? You think you've died and gone to the Abha kingdom. Well, they're not deaf. They can understand, although they may not know the words in English. The beauty of the music, they can understand. The great songs of Paul Robeson, tell them, is one of the greatest Negro singers that has ever lived in the world, you see. And hear his songs. And some of the Indian music is so melodious, especially the music that has the background of the drum. The sagas of Mauritius are very similar to the music of Haiti, you see, with this drum background. And also a kind of Creole French. Well, you can get interesting music. It won't sound like everybody else's station. Try it out and see how the people respond to it. You might find that being innately musical, they would like this and listen to the Baha'i station because it had a different kind of music. And then read excerpts from the teachings that are general in nature and say, of course, this is the Baha'i program. You don't really have to say more than that. And then general things from the writings, prayers, a prayer for children, a prayer for the dead, a prayer for whatever the occasion is, some of these marvelous excerpts from the teachings, and get the local committee in Lekai, because the different dialect there, in Cap, another dialect, to speak these things onto the tape so that you can put them on the radio. And that will go out to people in the dialect that they understand, which of course the whole point. Who cares if they understand the upper crust French of Port-au-Prince? That's not the point. I think that really what I've seen of the community here, first you have Haitians that can help now with the translation and certainly can read it beautifully. See what I mean? Then you have pioneers who have a lot of technical skills who could organize getting these tapes ready. And then you just buy time and go to town on it.
Rúhíyyih Khánum, I would like to, I don't know, you said that we should translate in different parts, you know. If we make a tape here, you know, of a program, you know, and we send it to CAP, I don't know if CAP has les appareils to...
They must have small radio stations. In Cap, they have 4.
No. For the... If we send a cassette over there, and they have to translate in the Creole of Cap, you know? Is not what you say?
No, you're crazy. Excuse me. You send the music, the cassette in music. Then you let them make their own program. It doesn't matter. Let them make a committee in Cap
Oui, but how are they going to tape
Because
it?
there
They have
is,
no machine.
look, there are people here, I don't know which ones of you, there are plenty of young men in this room that know how to record. So, what you do, you arrange that they should take this and this and this of the writings. You read it and see how many minutes it's going to take, you
Yes,
see, for
that's
your
done.
program. That's very simple.
Yes.
Then you get some of your young school teachers, your young students in CAP, in Lekai, some of the nice assistants you've got there, the ones that we met, plenty of people, the talent is there. And you get them to record these, to read these things.
On the tape.
Sure, and then you've got the tape in your hand, you see. That's not a problem. But the trouble is that we're so tied up in the bowknots of machinery nowadays, till you get going on it, till somebody takes a decision, till somebody else gets the person in front of the thing that they're going to dictate, or they get the excerpt and choose it, and then gets translated into the local Creole. But I think you've got to do this. I think that now is the time in Haiti. Certainly the money to buy time on the radio will be forthcoming.
I have a question to ask about the radio programming itself. I've been working preparing programs, but I don't know, it's almost like I feel that there should be a beginning to it in the concept of the program. Like the way the programs would be initiated, like the first type of subject that would be going in the air will almost be like introductory to who we are and what kind of message we're bringing.
Well, that's useless. Excuse me.
Yes.
Now, I tell you why. Because, first of all, they'll forget it. Second, you can't keep repeating it all the time, because they'll get bored to death, you see. So why don't you just go on and say, c'est ici les Bahá de Cap. On vous parle de notre nouveau programme de la foi Bahá'í. And then you say a few things. On va commencer par une prière. And you read a nice little prayer, and then you say, au sujet de la femme, on va causer aujourd'hui au sujet de la femme dans la société du monde aujourd'hui, and you take some nice excerpts, and you put it in Creole, and somebody reads it, and then you start with your music, you see. So you could even have an hour's program to begin, and then you say, ici la station Bahá'í. Then gradually people begin to say, well, station Bahá'í, avez-vous écouté ça? C'est pas mal. Et la musique est très jolie d'ailleurs. Ça m'a plu beaucoup. All right, they start listening. Then eventually along comes a Baha'i and says, well, I'm a Baha'i. That's Station Baha'i. That's me, you see. You say, oh, qu'est-ce que c'est Baha'i? This is the way to do it. You don't want to make a big speech and an opening and a song and dance in the beginning. I wouldn't, because I don't think it'll have any effect. And it'll irritate the missionaries. Mm-hmm. Keep a low profile.
So what you're saying is then that we should concentrate on translating the writings themselves into Creole and transmitting that over the air, basically.
Well, I think, Stuart, you have to remember certain things. According to every religion, including our own, the word of the manifestation is the word of God, which is the bread of life. And nothing else is. Neither the words of Shoghi Effendi, the House of Justice, Amatu'l Bahá. It has not the same effect. The word of the manifestation of God transforms the world. Now, we don't want to visualize the cause with one word less of what Amatu'l Bahá has said and given us, or Shoghi Effendi, or today the House of Justice. It's not the word of God. So it's extremely important to me that there should always be, even a small section, some of the hidden words, some of the passages of Baha'u'llah. You have these marvelous excerpts, translate them into simple Creole, and ça c'est le parole sacré de Baha'u'llah, le fondateur de la foi Baha'i, and then just read it, you see. And then if you want to take other excerpts, or you find other material, certainly you're going to need more than just that. You can't have a half an hour program of reading the writings of Baha'u'llah. That's too concentrated and too involved. But it can be done. You know, when we were in Belize, which is another very small country, they had been given time on the national radio. And they had a Baha'i program for a long time. And the Baha'is began to proselytize. And the government took the program back. because everybody was complaining that they're thrusting this religion over the radio down our throats. All right, nothing happened. I think it was 2 years suspended. 2 years they couldn't get on the air at all in Belize because they'd spoiled their own chances through being foolish and doing what Baha'u'llah said don't do, proselytizing. So, along comes an American and an English girl, very lovely young women, and the National Assembly encourages them to try and get things on the air, and they get back a Baha'i program which comes on, is it once a week or once a week? Once a week. Well, anyway, I forget.
It's once a week. Yeah.
It's once a week, optimum time, and they had chosen one of these Baha'i songs. I don't particularly like Baha'i songs, but this happened to be very beautifully sung. God is one, and man is one, and everything is one. You know, I hate that song. It's so stupid. But the point is that it happened to be a lovely group of voices, and then they had very nice little things that were on it, you see, excerpts that were suitable, no shoving it down people's throats, no propaganda, but this was the Baha'i program. The whole country was listening to it, and it was on the government radio, and they were delighted to have them on that program. Because they were intelligent, you see. They did it just the right degree. The right kind of program and the right degree.
Well, I think that if we did have a radio program, I think it would help it would help to eliminate some of this reluctance to do mass enrollment like we were doing before. Because, you see, what we're doing now is we're concentrating on families and growing from families and to neighbors. You see, it's not like we were doing at the beginning when we were enrolling everywhere, all over the place, and then having problems with follow-up. But if we had a radio program, we certainly could feel that at least there is some follow-up on the airwaves, even if people cannot go in the very isolated areas.
Well, I'll tell you, I think that one of the great handicaps of the human race is that we are not sufficiently well-balanced or intelligent to be moderate. And you see, Baha'u'llah says this is the religion of moderation. He recommends moderation. And Shoghi Effendi, over and over again, he said, this is the religion of the golden mean. This is the religion of the middle of the way, neither this extreme nor that extreme. And the Baha'is are constantly going to extremes. Now, you want to consolidate the families. It's tremendously important because the family is the unit of society. So if you could get the family to have prayers, the family to want to bring other people into the faith, and the family to become more or less consolidated as a Baha'i family, that's of great importance, but it doesn't mean you can't do anything else. You see, the Baha'is, I see it because I travel so much. They get a hold of this passage of the House of Justice, attract people of importance. So every Tom, Dick, and Harry won't leave Chicago because he thinks he should stay there and attract people. Balance.
Well, I agree. I think we should come to a conclusion about which theme we're going to use on the radio program, because I think we had 3 meetings. We kept talking about but we were just on that one topic. It took such a long time.
Well, that's because you're talking and not taking any action, see. If you just try, I think that what you should do, I know what I do, let's put it this way. Supposing I lived in Cap or here, let's take Cap, because I think I've only had experience with 3 stations in Cap. And when I saw what 2 of those stations were like, I just laughed. I said, the Baha'is can buy time on this thing, they can put up a station like this, but then you'd have to have someone to run it. Then you run into money and complications, as I know from all over the Baha'i world. Do you know how long it took us to get that thing in Otavalo going, the first one in Ecuador? It killed us. So we got people to go down there and set up that radio station, that Baha'i one in Otavalo in Ecuador. My God, I thought we'd never get it out of our hair. because it was so shaky and we didn't have the manpower and the person was running it went home and nobody was to take their place, and how are you going to take it off the air when all the Indians and all the altiplano were sitting there listening to it and so on. It's very complicated. But if you hire time, then it seems to me, even if it's only a 15-minute program, 3 times a week, or a 15-minute program daily, but take off a little bit. Bite off a small mouthful. And supposing it was 3 times a week, 15 minutes. All right? That's not too much of a problem. I'm very poor at mathematics, but you should be able to get 6 months of 15-minute programs with a little bit of reading in Creole in the beginning and follow it up with some nice music afterwards, to be ready to go. It shouldn't be all that difficult. Really, it shouldn't.
I think what we tend to get stuck on, I know for myself, is perfection. You know, I want it just perfect. And what I'm saying is, for this, we should just let go of that and give it our best. Try it, but not worry about, well, what's it going to sound like? Is this the right beat, the right tempo? You know, because I feel that that's what's slowing us down a lot.
You'd be using regular commercial music that has been. You're not going to start writing music for them.
No.
You're going to just pick out good bands with good music from here, there, and everywhere, and put it on the radio.
I think what put us thought was when somebody said something about copyrights would be violating copyright of the music.
Well, look, it's very simple. Walk into that station that I broadcast over in Cap, where they had hundreds of tapes lying all around the room, and ask him how he pays the copyright on using that music. Just find out. He doesn't.
I agree entirely with you. You know, it's a marvelous idea.
Okay. No, I am by nature, myself, a perfectionist. And it has its advantages, because it meant that if I did something for Sheriff Fenton, he had a fair chance of getting it pretty well done, because I was a perfectionist. On the other hand, it's wasted an awful lot of time in my whole life because I fuss so much, you see. Because I'm fussy, because I'm a perfectionist. But we shouldn't sacrifice. There's a question of getting your values. We should realize that this is a crisis in human history, and as much as all of you can do, you better get cracking on it, because you haven't got forever, you see.
There's a chapter in To Move the World, the book of Louis Gregory on Haiti. Linda Gershny mentioned that the chapter was in there, and I was reading the book, so I passed and I went straight to it in Atlanta, and I read it. And it was moving for me to sort of hear it from that distance, about Haiti, and what Louis Gregory had to say about how the progress of Haiti will happen. I can't remember it was on the very last paragraph, the very last sentence of his letter, when he talks about it's either the pioneers or the Haitians themselves that will get this country moving.
Well, it'll be a combination.
A combination.
Because now they've got so many good Baha'is here that the pioneers don't have to do it alone.
Yeah.
They've got help, and they're going to increasingly get help from the Haitians.
The thing is to allow ourselves to let it go, to let them help their own country raise up and grow.
Well, again, if everybody just do what they can. All right, the pioneers, from what I've seen, they have more cars than the local people because they've got more money. They just happen to own the cars, and the other people don't. The kind of patients we have in the faith now, most of them haven't got cars. All right, that's already a way that the pioneers are able to serve the Haitians. Technical knowledge in making these programs. That's simple. You've got to know how. sufficiently amongst yourselves to do it. If you've got any Asians that have a better know-how, rope them in too. It doesn't matter. Do it. That's the whole country to do it. And I think one of the things that we Baha'is should remember is that so often we're on the inside looking out. And you know, I'm getting awfully tired of my fellow Baha'is in the sense that we are beginning to talk a regular jargon. You go to a Baha'i meeting and you listen to us. Well, the ITC said this. Well, the NSA said that. Well, the LTS said something else. Well, the ABC something else. I went home to Haifa one year, and I'm great friends with many of the secretaries of the House of Justice that have been serving there for years. They're very close to me, and I see them very often. And they were chattering away and tossing these abbreviations around. I said, stop it. What are you talking about? I said, this is my home. I've lived here all of these years, and I have the faintest idea what you're talking about. Fins was the Baha'i newsletter, and the finance department was the Fins or something. It's a jargon. It's an inter-office jargon, you see. Well, for heaven's sake, don't let's all us get like that so that we get so involved in our funny little Baha'i vocabulary that we don't realize that people out there neither know nor care what we're talking about. We're going to present it like that. And often we want to present what appeals to us because we're inside to those people who are outside to whom it would have no appeal whatsoever. So this is really, if you think about it, this is marketing, isn't it? The science of marketing. You see what the customer wants. And you give him that. You don't give him what the boss wants to sell. Not if you're honest anyway. You try and give him something that he wants, that is of use to him.
The Japanese say.
What did the Japanese say?
The Japanese say you always sell in the customer's language, you always buy in your own.
That's intelligent.
I have a question, from your own experience in other countries, the kind of radio programs that are most like the mass production, let's say, that you can have everywhere in the country, would they be, let's say, a once a week, let's say half-hour program, 20-minute program, or let's say everyday tidbits, or what kind of a timing is most effective into, let's say, a country like this one here?
You see, again, Mauro, you're thinking on a grand scale. You are now, what you just said, if you analyze it, is you're thinking about Haiti in relationship to the Baha'i programs all over the planet in other countries, and what scale would be the best thing to embark on here. So immediately, you're well off in theory. I'm suggesting that you just get 15 minutes a week, or 3 times a week 15 minutes, or 5 or 7 times a week 15 minutes. Find out how much it costs. Experiment with it, but then you've got to have enough of a backlog so you don't pull it off the radio, you see, because then you lose space. And that's very bad for the Baha'i faith. So you try it. You try it in Cap. If you think Cap is the place to try it, I think Cap. My personal opinion is I wouldn't try it in this area at all. It's too sophisticated. This is the capital. They speak a lot more French here. The appeal would have to be very, very much different in this area, anything that was broadcast from here, than either in Jacmel, Lekai, or in Cap, you see. So you take a place where it's easy, like Cap. I say that because when I saw this English woman, was she English? No, she's half Haitian. Anyway, there was a woman there that has a couple of little bins like this, and she's got a full-time living out of this radio station. And the other was even worse, and if you saw the ones in Gonaïve and St. Mark, you'd faint. Absolutely faint. I have never seen anything like it. It was like the back of the bar sort of thing. Well, they're broadcasting all day long, and people are advertising, and people are turning it on, and they're listening, you see. Start something that is feasible. Very modestly. As I said, very low profile, but that you won't have to stop. That you can follow through on it. That I would not go near it. I wouldn't touch it with a 10-foot pole. unless I had an idea in my mind of how, what length of time I was going to do it weekly. And then I had the tapes to back it up for at least 6 months, and saw how it went, and then you'd be enough ahead of time, you see, so that you could go on feeding in. You could do the next 6 months while you were using up that 6 months that you had on tape. And seeing how it went, why then you can be all the time feeding in for the next 6 months, but you mustn't go off the air, you see. That's the secret. You've got to do it in a way that you know that you're not going to have to pull up. Now, they're going to be the ones that broadcast it. You don't have to do anything. All you do is to pay for the contract. The station does the work. But you've got to have your 15 minutes ready to hand them every single week. Here's your 15 minutes of the Baha'i program.
Here in Port-au-Prince, they have, on the Christian program, they have music all day. At a certain time of the day, they have something to think about. That's how they announce it. They have the announcer saying that so-and-so is going to speak about something to think about. Mm-hmm. And then this man comes on and he talks about divorce, or he talks about some Christian teaching. And he talks for about maybe 3, 5, sometimes 10 minutes. Mm-hmm. And then he ends about something to think about, and then it goes off the air. And sometimes I look forward listening to it because he has some very interesting points, you know. That
well, all right, do the same thing. Only don't try and swing something. It's a 4 or 5 hour program or so. No. Buy the time and do it modestly. Always we Baha'is think in grandiloquent terms, and while we're getting up steam to do a colossal enterprise, time is passing, we're doing absolutely nothing. Yeah.
I felt recently that on my own particular team, that when we go out and teach in the villages, that we haven't been spending enough effort in using the word of Baha'u'llah itself in Creole.
Yeah.
It's very easy to go in a village, you know, and you sit down, you have a meeting, and you immediately start talking and explaining the teaching. But constantly, people never really hear the actual word of Baha'u'llah.
Well, you can read it, can't you? Instead of that, you can have a couple of prayers and a little excerpt at the beginning of the meeting.
Okay, but what I'm asking is, supposing we individually wanted to translate from French or from English into Creole, does this translation have to be approved by the NSA every time, or can it be used on a teaching trip without having to go through this procedure?
Stuart, I can't answer that question. The person that can answer that is the National Assembly, because that's why we have a National Assembly. But I do think that sometimes we get it always on the theoretical scale. The National Assembly doesn't probably meet all that often or all that effectually. So you go and you present for 9 people or 7 or however many are present to hash out a half-baked idea which is not going to be handled by that NSA for perhaps 3 or 4 sessions, and then another half year is gone. But if you came to them with a sample, you see, and say, look, we've been thinking about this, and we suggest that we do something like this, and this is the kind of thing it would be, and would you approve of it? Do you want to make a committee now to just work on this particular thing and get it done, you see? If they need the money for the tapes and things, well, that's fine. The money will be forthcoming. I will pay from the funds I have at my disposal in the Holy Land. You don't have to ask the NSA. You don't have to ask the House of Justice. I have some money that I can help with this kind of thing if it isn't too heavy an expenditure, and I'd love to do it.
We are getting some money from the council at Rúhíyyih Khánum.
Well, whatever it is, my point is it isn't money that's holding you up. The thing that's holding you up is theories. Mm-hmm. Here. Oh, tomorrow, where's Debbie gone? Here. Oh, there. I just got closer. Morrow, tell them when there might be the radio interview on the news.
Yes. We had an interview at Radio Nationale today, and if everything goes according to what the man promised me, Roland Tadal is the one that promised the interview and managed to have the interview going on, but it's one man for Michel who interviewed Rúhíyyih Khánum. So if Roland Talal keeps to his word, we're going to have Rúhíyyih Khánum cast twice. Once tomorrow in the magazine de l'après-midi or something of that sort, a magazine. It goes between 1 to 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And what the boy said was it's going to go in the news Monday morning between 6:30 and 7 o'clock in the morning. So I think both times are prime time. People do listen to the radio at that time. You know, Sunday afternoon. Well, you know what you said. We'll see what they hear what you said. Can I also talk about the television interview?
Well, why not? It hasn't happened, but
It hasn't
go ahead and talk
happened
about
yet,
it.
but we finally broke through. Lila Desquiron has managed with Chéri, what's his name, Jean-Claude Chéri, to have an interview with Rúhíyyih Khánum on a program, Radio Télé Nationale, called Carte sur Table. I've never seen it. Apparently it's a new program. It's a 35-minute program. And the whole program from A to Z will be Rúhíyyih Khánum. And they will interview her on who she is, what she represents, what is the faith, why she came to Haiti, what has she accomplished in Haiti, and what she thinks of Haiti. And there will be her talk and slides of her trip in Haiti, slides of the Holy Land. And they might even ask her statistical information like how many Baha'is are in the country and where do they live and things like that. Yes?
I have mediocre to good pictures of all the temples.
We take them, sure, we get slides. We also, well, in good pictures, we have them in the teaching book, because they can blow that too very well. They say they can
Those
blow
are very
anything,
good if
snapshots.
they'll do it.
Very good
Those
photographs.
temples, if they'll do it, it's excellent.
They did it once with Télévision Télé Haiti. They put it on the board last year and they did beautiful
Yeah, that's true.
shots with it.
Anyway, I had one other thought that I wanted to share with the pioneers because, well, I just think it would be illuminating for you. I think you ought to know it. One day, I said to Shoghi Effendi, he was talking about some situation, I forget what the details were. And I looked at him, I said, Shoghi Effendi, you're so suspicious. Because he'd been, bristling with suspicion. And I said, but Shoghi Effendi, you're so suspicious. He said, I suspicious? You should have known Amatu'l Bahá. He said he was much more suspicious than I am. Now, this was an absolute revelation to me. We always think of Amatu'l Bahá kissing the babies and walking around and showering love on everybody and being so patient and so forbearing and always we Baha'is should look on the good and never on the bad and so on and mention the good and not the evil. And we know our own teachings, you see. So this was a tremendous surprise to me, revelation to me. And then I understood from the Guardian that you couldn't possibly protect the faith unless you were suspicious. You see, suspicion puts you on your guard. If you don't visualize that something can happen, how can you protect yourself? All right, she has a little baby. She sees the baby go near the stove. If she isn't suspicious that, where is that child, my God? She turns around, the child was there a minute ago. Lord, it may be going towards the stove, you see. If she can't visualize the danger, how can she protect the child, you see? If we can't visualize the danger to the cause of God, how can we protect the cause of God? Why do we have protection members of the board? To protect the Baha'is, to protect the faith, to protect the cause of God. From enemies, it doesn't have to be covenant breakers, from any attack, from any enmity. We should be vigilant, you see. Now, I often think that my experience with the Baha'is is that they are such dear people with so much love and devotion that they think that, first of all, God's going to do everything, and that it's always the will of God. I don't know why. Any kind of a mess, it must have been that Baha'u'llah wanted it that way. I don't know why he should, you know. I don't know why when I make a mess I should say Baha'u'llah wanted it that way. But I do. And then the same thing is true about suspicion. If we don't visualize the possibility of attack, if we don't visualize the possibility of being exploited, of being victimized, being made a fool of, you see, then how can we protect the cause and how can we protect ourselves? And the Baha'is are far too trusting. It doesn't mean you don't love your fellow men, to open your eyes and see what they're like and not let them get away with it. They're two entirely different subjects, you see. And I see this because I travel so much. I can't tell you the extraordinary naivete of the Baha'is. They don't seem to realize that this world is a bad place. And that just being a Baha'i isn't going to necessarily protect you. You have to use your own intelligence. I mean, after all, the words of the Bible are very true. God helps those who help themselves. Another thing that I learned after, having the privilege of living with Shohi Effendi was that he didn't let people get away with anything. And often the Baha'is seem to think that they would, for instance, never exploit another person. They know that they're honest, and they will conduct themselves in an honest way. I don't mean about changing money or anything. I mean true honesty. They will be honest with other people, you see, honest in their dealings and in their feelings. But they never seem to realize they have any responsibility about seeing that other people are honest too. It's very, very subtle point, you know. I have seen Baha'is, they are so virtuous, you see. But somebody can cheat them, and because they didn't cheat, you see, they think that's all right, because I'm virtuous. I didn't cheat anybody, but by God, I let that person cheat me. Remember the words of the Bab, Maku, when his secretary went out and bought the honey, and he said, "You paid too much, take it back, you were cheated." Manifestation of God. Then when he paid the man the full price of the carpet, because he should have sold it at that price, but he didn't, so he didn't make his customer suffer, and he put on himself the extra money that he should have sold it for and neglected to do so, evidently not coming to the right decision at the right time, and he wasn't going to let his customer suffer. You see, scrupulous honesty. But he wasn't going to allow anybody to impose on him, because that is making the other person's character bad. And I often think that the Baha'is don't realize that in their travels around the world, many, many times, they do people a great injustice. Because they think, it's all in my manual for pioneers, incidentally, there's a chapter on it. They think that by being exceedingly kind and loving to other people, which may involve that the other person is really exploiting your loving kindness all the time, like mad, that they are being wonderful Baha'is. They are showing forth the spirit of the faith to other people, whereas they may be ruining that person's character, because they're encouraging that person to get away with murder. And I am conniving at it by being too blind, too lenient, too excusing, and so on. That's not the way to do it. But I was talking about that, and then I said that I wanted to remember to say that to the Baha'is, because I don't think that any of us coming from our background in this part of the Western world would dream that suspicion could be a good characteristic for a Baha'i to have, you see.
One of the problems we have with this subject is the prohibition against backbiting in the cause. And when we have a suspicion and we feel that maybe we should share it with someone who might be being taken advantage of or something, then we feel, well, that's backbiting about this other person that we think may be causing the problem.
Well, I think that a great deal has to do with motive, and I think also that there's a lot of idle gossip. I think that if I set out to defame somebody else on hearsay, and I'm not sure of my facts, I think this is criminal. This is what Baha'u'llah says, that if you kill a person with a sword, he's dead, but if you kill him with your tongue, you kill him for 100 years, because you kill his reputation, you see. And the only subject that Baha'u'llah mentions and says accursed is backbiting in the hidden words. It's very strange. He uses the adjective accursed, which is a curse, you see. When you say a thing is accursed, it's as strong as you can get. And the only thing that I've seen anywhere in the writings, except cursing some of the enemies of the faith, is backbiting. It's a terrible, terrible thing. But to have enough sense to keep your eyes open, be a little suspicious. If the Baha'is had been a little bit more alert and suspicious, they wouldn't have had the history of the terrible scandal on the National Spiritual Assembly, which had even reached the ears of the government. Well, that's a big help. Why shouldn't they have their eyes and ears wide open to protect the faith? But that doesn't mean that I have any right, without the slightest proof, to say that Moro is dishonest, Violette is dishonest. You see, she stole something. Oh, my goodness, that's a terrible thing. But I must be vigilant. Because if I don't, if I'm not, why then I'm just silly. Yeah.
I'd like to press that one a little bit because it's very interesting to me. If you know beyond a reasonable shadow of a doubt that a certain person has a problem, let's say it's dishonesty, and you know it through personal experience, obviously it is not your place to take out an ad in the paper and tell the world that this person is dishonest. However, if you're going to have business dealings on the other side of the coin, obviously you're going to be suspicious. But it's that gray area in between. When a friend of yours or someone else asks you what you think of so-and-so, because I'm intending to entrust him with $1,000.
If I didn't think they were honest, I'd say I advise you not to.
Yes. But you wouldn't
But I would be quite sure that it wasn't out of any personal animosity that I made that statement. You see? Supposing that I say something like that about another person because I think they've insulted me or offended me or I don't like them or I want to, have a dig at them, I think that's criminal. Then I'm going to be punished by God. But if I sincerely believe that that person is not honest, I have reason to believe. And you come and you say, Rúhíyyih Khánum, do you think that I should lend this fellow £1,000? Well, I'd say I'd be very, very careful. I'd be darn sure that they're honest before I dream of lending them £1,000.
Well, just a small, to one side of that a little bit. What if the subject of that person came up between us, but we weren't talking about business? Would you mention his character at that point?
Oh, in what sense?
Well, you see, if for instance, the subject of $1,000 came up, you would be sure to say, I would be very careful with that person, okay? But if the subject of $1,000 did not come up, in other words, we were just talking about this man because we were talking about his job or something else.
And would you volunteer the information?
Yes, you see, there's a very gray point there.
Yes, but if I sincerely believed that the other person was not honest, I would volunteer the information. Why wouldn't I? But I would try to be very, very sure of my facts, or alternatively, very sure of the person that I was talking to. Because I'm sorry to say, lots of people are fools. You don't dare say anything to them, because they're not going to understand. Whatever you say is going to be misquoted, misunderstood, misinterpreted, and so on. But if you're dealing with a person that is a little bit sensible and trustworthy themselves, you say, look, I may be wrong, but you asked me a question, and I really suspect that that person may not be strictly honest. But then I think you have to really be quite sure that you think that person is not honest. I'm a person, I'll give you an example. I have a hereditary characteristic. The moment my mother lost anything in the whole world, she thought it had been stolen. Really, to the most extraordinary degree. I can remember once, it was a very cute thing. My mother was very small, my father was very tall. And my mother came and looked at my father very indignantly and said, Sutherland, have you seen my corset? His mother said, what did you do? And he said, never wear them, my dear. But to such a degree, my mother always thought the moment she lost anything had been stolen. I'm like that too. Violette travels with me and lives with me. My God. If I lay that handkerchief down And before I go to bed, I can't find it. I think it's been stolen. I don't think you stole it or you stole it. You stole it, but I think it's been stolen. I couldn't possibly have dropped it on the floor, you see. But that doesn't mean that I allow this to run away with me, and I run around telling people that, oh, I think that's been stolen, and I don't know, the only person that was around was Mary Jane, and maybe. I wouldn't dream of doing it. I'd consider that criminal. But that's the way my mind would go, you see. Then, of course, she goes and finds it, and then the hullabaloo is all over.
No, I try to protect myself.
That, you take that back. If anybody's reaching that, that's calumny. And backbiting.
She's looking you right in the face.
You know, very well.
That was a joke.
Wait a minute, in 20 years I never suspected you took it in a pen. You see how much in harmony there is in my family. No, I think everything requires a lot of common sense. But I don't believe that being exploited is an advantage. You know, Violetta and I like marketing. And we go to bazaars in all kinds of countries. And in spite of the fact that I have learned to bargain, that I have Scottish blood, and that I will not quit easily on the price of things, she always tells me, now look, you just indicate you want it and then go away and leave it to me. Because she will be able to bargain so much better than I. I'm still fundamentally a naive North American, you see, and I will, in the end, be fleeced. But not this one. And I admire her for that. I don't think that to be cheated is something that I should be proud of. Now, if I cheat somebody else, I certainly shouldn't be proud of that. That's all wrong, too. But to be cheated is not something you should be proud of. Shoghi Effendi used to bargain, you know, all these things he bought for the shrines and the archives. And he bought them from very, very famous firms. The things, the garden ornaments were bought from a very, very internationally known firm. And he'd say, I can't pay that much. And he'd bargain with the man that was selling it to him. And almost invariably brought the price down. And then I remember things that Shoghi Effendi wanted. And something that was very unique, a very beautiful marble basin that would have looked wonderful in the gardens. And I begged him to buy it. He said, no, it's too expensive. And the man that was selling it, he said, you know, Mr. Rabbani, I'd be glad to bring down the price. But I paid an awful lot for it, and I really can't make it any cheaper than that, even for you. And then Shoghi Effendi wouldn't buy it. And I said, Shoghi Effendi, you have the money. You can buy it. I mean, the money of the faith for Badji or Mount Carmel. He said, no, it's too much. His conscience would not allow him to spend the money on that because he sincerely believed that was too much. That was going too far, you see.
I'm very glad to hear that. Canadians have a reputation apparently abroad for being too cheap, that they bargain for things and don't like to pay too much for hotel rooms, and don't leave too large tips and this sort of thing. I wasn't aware of that when I came here.
Really?
There are some hoteliers here.
Canadian?
You should hear with French people.
Well, are you saying that we're shrewder than the Americans and don't tend to be fleeced as easily?
Well, I wasn't putting any connotation on that. Just glad to hear that Shoghi Effendi was not afraid to bargain. I have been chastised for bargaining in certain circles, you know, where it's not a nice thing to do to bargain, such as eating.
Oh, my dear. Baha'is come to work at the World Center, and Violette and I and other Baha'is living there will say, well, we bargained, or I bargained for it, and this Baha'i will draw themselves up with the greatest amount of sanctimonious and say, couldn't possibly bargain for anything. You know, one saves a dirty word. They're the ones that are wrong, not us that are doing the bargainings. They're the ones that are being fleeced and then laughed at. And if you allow people to cheat you as a Baha'i, then they'll be glad to have cheated you and they'll despise you, you see. But if you show that you're fair and honest, but you're not going to give in and be cheated, they'll respect you. They may be sore that they couldn't get it out of you, but they'll respect you. And I think that's something that the Baha'is want us to be respected.
I think that as far as
Oh yes, that is a story that I heard from Hassan Bayuzi, and his father was present. You know, Harrods, a very, very famous shop in London, and still world famous shop. And the master went there with the party of his retinue, I don't know how many people accompanying him, and one of them was the father of Hassan Bayuzi. And the master saw something he liked, and he inquired the price, and he said it was too much. He wouldn't pay it, and they should reduce the price. And of course, you can imagine in Harrods anybody saying that they should reduce the price. Well, they were horrified, and the master didn't buy it, and he left. And he got down as far as the front door, and the manager, the floor walker, whoever was the head of that department, came running after him, said, "Sir, we are agreeable to accepting your price." Now, and he saw this himself. He was present, you see. And then you know the story. It's in the Priceless Pearl. Chogi Fendi told me, and I repeated it in the Priceless Pearl because he was present. He was about 12 years old in Alexandria, and he was taking a pasha home for lunch, and the cab driver, you see, when they reached the house in the suburbs of Alexandria where he had rented a villa and was staying, and this gentleman was there, and the guardian, the 12-year-old guardian. The guardian was small anyway, so when he was 12, he was even smaller. And this great big crochet, you know, with this roughness, which seems to be a characteristic of coachmen all over the world, asked Abdul Bahá for a certain sum of money. He said it was too much. He wouldn't pay him that was not what he owed him. And then the man began to argue with him, and Chogi Effendi said that he was so embarrassed he didn't know what to do. And the man put his hand in the cummerbund of Abdul Bahá and began to push him back and forth like this. And the master paid no attention. Said, "I'm not going to pay you. That's not right, and I won't pay you." And when he found, of course, that he couldn't win, well, then he let go of Abdul Bahá, and he paid him exactly what he owed him. He said, "I was going to give you a good tip, but now you've completely forfeited it." And he walked off with his pasha and with his grandson.
In Ramling, that's
Ramling.
Even with the simple thing is buying from the marchands, vegetables, we try to get 14 cents out of banana, and my challenge of the day is to get them for what I know Haitians could buy them for, because I know that's a good price, and so I would just really stick with them. And I was told one time that I shouldn't do that because they're poor and they're hungry, and I said, "But I'm hungry too, but I'm not going to pay 14 cents for 1 grain banana when I know I can get it for 7 cents."
For 3 in Jackman.
4 cents. And now he gets them for 4.
Doesn't that work two ways? Like, we suppose that we can pay the same price as the Haitians, but then when it comes to paying the wages of somebody, an expatriate, and the wages of the Haitian gets at least half of what the expatriate gets. That's regarded as being normal, but it doesn't seem to me to be fair or just that we should expect to always pay the same price as the Haitian for everything.
No.
What? I'm not with you. What do you mean?
Any job in this country where you have a choice between an expatriate,
What do you mean, a white man?
A white man.
somebody
Blonde.
from France or Canada or
All right.
Okay.
from outside.
They automatically get at least twice as much as a Haitian gets.
Yes,
If a Haitian's going to
if
be
not
paid
50
300,
times more.
Yeah, it's just regarded as being normal.
Well, what
Although
about
they,
it?
They both may be of equal qualifications.
So what are you going to do about it?
Okay, well, is it just then that the Blanc should pay the same price as a Haitian in the market?
Of course, one subject has nothing to do with the other. I mean, that to me, excuse me, Stuart, I call that muddled thinking. I don't see what one has to do with the other. Then you'd better take about 80% of your wages, which are much more than the average Haitian villager, for instance, is getting, and turn it over to charity here in this country, you see.
No, I'm not talking about villagers. I'm talking about somebody,
All
an
right, in
engineer
the
or somebody
town,
like
in
that.
the town. I cannot see why, if the price of carrots is 1 gourd a kilo, because somebody is getting a wage that is half of what a white man is getting, I should pay 5 gourds for a kilo in order to compensate for that other job. To me, the two subjects are entirely separate, because I am being cheated if I don't pay the going price.
I agree
But
with
I
that,
can't
yeah.
do anything about the social injustices in the world, which you know exist in every country in the world, including here.
But you do agree that that is a social injustice.
Of course it is. It's a criminal injustice. But why did Baha'u'llah appear? Because the whole world is stinking with injustice. Why does he say that? As Shoghi Effendi said, why does he call them the houses of justice, not the houses of mercy? He used to tell the Baha'is, he said, if Baha'u'llah had wanted to call these the houses of mercy, he would have, but he didn't want to, because that's not what they are. They are the houses of justice.
What is justice?
What?
What is justice?
Well, justice, after all, first of all, you have laws, then you obey the laws. They are laid down, you follow them, you see that they are applied equitably to the poor and the rich alike. No matter who the person standing at the bar is, he gets exactly the same kind of justice and the same kind of treatment. I mean, it's not such a mystery what justice is.
I've been up to the country, Deb and I have, several times with one of our associates who is an upper-class Haitian gentleman who happens to love the people of Haiti. And I watch how he handles things like that. When he bargains for a coconut or something on the side of the road, for vegetables, which he loves to buy in the country to take home to his family, he always bargains down to the last cent and gets them at the going rate, and then gives an extra $1 afterwards if he wants to. And that's how, and I've asked him about that, and he says, well, it's just because I feel these people need it, and yet I don't want to be cheated. So that's how he overcomes that problem. Because that way he still has their respect, and yet he's been able to give them more than the rock bottom price.
Well, that's him. That's his personal opinion, and that's the way he wants to handle it. And I don't consider that I either have to do it that way or don't have to do it that way, that he is right and I am right.
So this is a suggestion for Stuart's comment that if you feel you are overpaid, and if you do feel there's a connection between your pay and what you should pay for things, that's not a bad way of getting around it. And with him, we had a long discussion about it, and I think he was trying to assuage your guilt.
Yes, but remember that the Haitian man knew how much he should pay.
Sure.
He knew that it was 14 centimes for a carrot or something, and therefore he said, well, all right, they are poor. So I'll buy this, that, and the other at the going rate, and then I'll give them a tip, a pourboire, a cadeau. That's his business, you see. But we'll never be able to do that, because in 1,000 years we will never pay what a Haitian does because we're white.
I disagree with you here.
Works in reverse sometimes.
Yeah.
There was a woman selling little plastic pearls on a string, on a thread, and I walked up and said, how much? And she said, 3 for $1. And I said, well, I'd like one and I'll give you a bird. So she gave it to me. So I came home, I brought it in the house, and I said, Meanie, how much should I have paid for this? Thinking she'd say 4 cents. And she said, oh, anywhere from $1 to $3. And I said, oh, really? She said, oh, yes, a Haitian would pay anywhere from $1 to $3 for that. And I said, but it's plastic. And she said, it doesn't matter. That's what a Haitian would pay. So I said, well, great. If I can get them so much more cheaply than you can, I'll get you one. So I went down again the next day, and I went up to, it was a man selling them this time, and I said, yesterday I bought one of these for a gourd. Today I'd like 2. I'll pay you 2 gourds.
And he started into his long spiel about what I was going to pay for it. I said, I'm sorry, a gourd each or nothing. So he said, oh, all right, all right. So he gave me 2 more, and I gave him the 2 gourds. And I went straight to the office to work. And the lab technician is a well-educated, very nice Haitian woman. I went in and I said, Lisa, how much should I have paid for this? And she said, anywhere from $1 to $3. And I said, that's terrific, because I got it for a gourd.
You should start a business, Deb.
No, but the one of the story, we picked up our children at school, and Deb asked Alice, how much should I pay for these? And Alice looked at him and she said, oh, you probably have to pay anywhere from $1 to $3, but I'd have bought it for a gourd. I figure she's Haitian.
But there is something else in our favor. Let's say, when we buy something from the market, let's say when a Haitian goes out and buys carrots, they usually don't buy much carrots, let's say when they buy tomatoes, they will end up buying 2 or 3 tomatoes, okay? When we buy tomatoes, we'll buy the basketful.
Yes.
So by itself, we are helping them a lot. Buying it at the going rate, you're not being cheated. On the other hand, you're buying so much more than the regular Haitian is buying, so they're making a better bargain, and they're not carrying so much weight on their heads. You're buying 2, 3 melons, for instance, or 5 dozens of oranges. Not many Haitians, unless they're upper class, would go. They go buy 1 orange or half an orange. So we're really doing them a favor that way too.
Sometimes even the merchants will throw in a couple of oranges
Yes.
extra at the end.
Yes.
Well, even if we bargain in the market, I think life is expensive enough.
Yes.
I mean, just the rent, $350, and then the electricity and everything else. So, you know, they get us anyway. So we can fight for the rest, you know. Otherwise, we have no money to live in this country. It's already so expensive.
You know, there is something else that we forget. Here you can bargain, and at the end of the day, the fruit seller, the vegetable seller, because he's come down, he sells everything he has. Now you go in Canada or United States or come to Haifa, you go to the vegetable shop, his potatoes are, $1 a kilo, and he's not coming a cent. At the end of the day and at the end of the week, tons of these things are thrown away because they cannot sell it. Who is paying for it? We are paying because they've already brought the price so high to cover themselves. So in the long run, it's the buyer who is cheated and pays for everything. So I think the Haitian is much more intelligent. He's ready to come down and sell his merchandise rather than and ask for more price and throw half of it away.
The best time I find to shop in that case is at night, just before I go home.
But you see, I think
when it
that,
rains.
for instance, mendicancy is forbidden in the Baha'i faith. Baha'u'llah is forbidden begging. Begging. It's forbidden. Well, I went down, the days I went down in the car with Greg, and then we'd walk around the town and come back afterwards when Greg was coming up the hill. All the time these people were bothering the life out of me, cadeau, and hanging a basket on the end of my nose and trying to push some beads down my neck and so on, you see, all just like that. So I found something to say. I said, je suis pas touriste. The moment I said that, even the next day when I walked down the same street, they didn't bother me anymore. So what were they doing? They were exploiting the tourists. I don't blame them. I'm not blaming them for anything, you see. But I'm just saying that there was really no reason why I should be exploited like a tourist or bothered like a tourist. That's between them and their economic situation and the human race and the stupidity of the American tourist, you see, the whole thing together.
Rúhíyyih Khánum, would you speak to us a little bit about the responsibility we have to our parents? The other day in Kathy you were saying that something to the fact that if our parents weren't happy with us, that God wasn't happy with us either.
Well, I didn't say that, Baha'u'llah did. You quote him. Come on. You remember the words of Baha'u'llah.
I think it wasn't that in the connection that Rúhíyyih Khánum was speaking about the fact that how much we emphasize our responsibility towards our children, what we should do for our children. It's all the time what we can do for the children, and we don't remember that there is a lot more in the teachings of Baha'u'llah, our responsibility towards our parents, really. And that it is towards the parents that Baha'u'llah says, in his own words, he said that if you want to achieve the good pleasure of God, you should achieve the good pleasure of your parents. In another place he said, if your parents are well satisfied with you, I am satisfied with you. Or the fact that you become a Baha'i and you cause the soul of your parents in the other world to draw nearer to Baha'u'llah. It is the importance of what we can do for our parents is very tremendous, and very little it is spoken of. What the duty we have towards them, the debt we owe them. Wasn't that?
Yes, and also if you think about what it says in the Baha'i teachings, it doesn't talk about your duty to your children except to bring them up in the cause of God. Fundamentally, is what the duty of the Baha'is to children is to bring them up in the cause of God. The purpose of education itself is that they should recognize God and accept the teachings of God. The purpose of education. You read what it says about education, the Baha'i faith, and then it ends up in just being this. Education is to make you recognize God and draw closer to God, you see. So the emphasis is on disciplining the child, bringing the child up properly, teaching the child his prayers, teaching the child to be God-fearing, teaching the child to be a good Baha'i. But it's not the emphasis of the duty of the parents to the children. The duty is of the child to the parents. You turned around the opposite direction in the teachings, yes.
This is an interesting point that came up because, like for example, my parents live in England, and it's extremely difficult for me to visit them. So really, I've almost abandoned my parents. You know, they pretty well have to fend for themselves. So, and in many cases, as pioneers, we are actually doing things which are against the wishes of our parents. You know, that very often our parents remind us frequently in letters that, you know, that now you've lived over there for 3 or 4 years, isn't it about time you went back to civilization and put your kids into good schools and generally started to live a normal life again, you know? So, but for me, being a Baha'i, I feel my first responsibility is towards the faith, not towards my parents.
I think that's perfectly clear in the teachings because ultimately there's a polarity. God and my soul. And nobody and nothing can really do anything about it because that's the whole thing. He created me and I have a soul and my soul must turn to Him and He has His own particular relationship to me, and that, as you say, is paramount. But that doesn't, I can't sacrifice that for my parents. If they say I can't marry, I will obey them, you see. I will treat them with respect. I will be loving. I will be kind. I will pray for them. I will do good deeds in their name. But sacrifice my service to Baha'u'llah and my relationship to Him, I can't for anybody in the world after we die for it, don't we? This is why they're being martyred. Pushed to keep him
Is there not an exception to that? Did not Amatu'l Bahá say that if one member, this is of a husband and wife, if one is not a Baha'i and objects very strenuously to active service in the faith, that you should cease the active service, not cease being a Baha'i, of course, but cease the active service?
Well, you'd have to show me the quotation, John. I'd have to see it in writing. I don't recollect that anywhere in the teachings. I have to see it in print.
You know what that is?
Somebody just told us that there was a compilation out from the Universal House that said something to that effect,
on
but I haven't seen
family
it.
life. It's in the compilation on family life.
Well, I still have to see the sentence, you see. I'd have to see the context and I'd have to see the sentence. But I do know that we have a great many letters from Shobi Fendi. People would write, you see, that the wife, the husband, the parents, whoever it was, wasn't a Baha'i. And he said that they should win them over with great kindness. And that they should show such love to the non-Baha'i that they would say that since my wife, my husband, my child, whatever it is, became a Baha'i, they are much better and kinder to me than they ever were before, you see. This is a demonstration of being a Baha'i. But I think, Stuart, for instance, you can write to your parents, you can pray for your parents, you can do things in your own service to the cause. What is to prevent you when you go on a teaching trip or something to say, look, Baha'u'llah, I wish to heaven you'd accept this as if my parents had done it, accept it in their name. Don't put it to my credit, put it to their credit, you see. What is the harm in doing that? I think this is permissible in the faith. But to go home to England and take care of your old parents just because they're homesick, you know, sonsick, and would like to have you back, I don't think that is called for. I don't think that would be necessarily the right thing to do, unless, of course, there was some terrible emergency and one of your parents desperately needed you and had no one else. We've had one of the secretaries of the House of Justice, Florence Avis, who's been a very wonderful secretary of the House and very valuable. And she's had to return with the greatest reluctance to the United States because she has a very old mother who hasn't anyone else in the world and has reached the point where she has to have care. And her daughter has gone home. We had the same thing with another very devoted Baha'i in Haifa. And her mother became senile in Switzerland, and there wasn't any other way out except for her to go back and take care of that mother. Well, all right, they did it, you see, but then that doesn't usually come to that point. It comes to the point that the parent wants the child to come home, or says, well, what are you doing? Haven't you been over there long enough? You see, come on back.
You just mentioned right now here, Khánum, you're doing an action, a good action in their name. Mm-hmm. I'd like to know somehow how it works. Like, if I go teach in a village, let's say, and I say, God, don't take it as if I'm doing it. They say, put the recompense on my mother, for instance.
Why not?
Even if my mother, let's say, could be against.
Accept it in her name, can't you?
So, prayer. I'd like to just share the story with my mother. My mother and father were strongly against the faith when I became Baha'i. And I started saying the prayer for parents, or what I call the prayer for parents that Amatu'l Bahá has. But I also kept note of everything that I considered that might be acceptable by God, any small act, whatever it was. And I always put it towards my mom and dad. My father now is in love with the faith where he will accept it to be a friend. And my mother became a Baha'i 3 years ago. And I strongly feel that it was because of those efforts on my part. Not that was the only reason, but that assisted that to come. You know, it works. It's really powerful how it has an effect on their lives.
But you see, this is in the writing. This is the whole point, again, of the writings. Greg, I don't think I can read this dim print without glasses. You come and read this cable that I got yesterday from the House of Justice out loud. I wanted to share it with everybody tonight.
Cruel, systematic oppression, long-suffering Iranian friends has reached new level intensity. Dwindling sources their livelihood further severely curtailed. Dismissal from jobs, cancellation trade licenses, confiscation private properties unabated. Homeless thousands thrown on mercy relatives, friends. Doors, schools closed to increasing number children. Fresh blood wantonly spilled after lull executions. With heavy hearts announce Habibullah Oji, enthusiastic active believer, hanged Shiraz 16th November. Recent evidence confirms martyrdom some time ago of two steadfast upholders' cause, Hadullah Sefer Arfa, executed by firing squad Tehran. Manucher Vafai, murdered in his home Tehran by unknown assailant, who attached note to body giving as reason for dastardly deed innocent victims Baha'i belief. Kindly inform authorities, media, latest developments. Universal House of Justice.
I don't know whether they've sent a copy of this to the National Assembly or not, but this was addressed to me. I don't really know what I can do about it. I don't know what any of us can do about it.
Inform the media.
Yes, of course, obviously, but my point is it is so terrible to be so completely impotent when things like this are happening, to know that there doesn't seem to be anything that we can do to change it. We can compensate for it in our services to the cause, but we don't seem to be able to stop it at all. Just terrible. I think it would be nice if we had some prayers for the friends. Prior Hawk, do you chant or not?
ای جمال نور عطا ای حضرت کبریا این نفوس سرگشتگان کوی فن و سودایان روی تو عنایتی فرما تا قلوب جلوگاه روی تو گردد و سرور آتشکده های پرسور انوار اسرار بر سرابر بتافد و پرتو بینش بر بساور زند.
Glory to thee, O my God. But for the tribulation which are sustained in thy path, how could thy true lovers be recognized? And were it not for the trials which are borne for love of thee, how could the station of such as yearn for thee be revealed? Thy might beareth me witness. The companions of all who adore thee are the tears they shed, and the comforters of such as seek thee are the groans they utter. And the food of them who haste to meet thee is the fragments of their broken hearts. How sweet to my taste is the bitterness of death suffered in thy path, and how precious in my estimation are the shafts of thine enemies when encountered for the sake of the exaltation of thy word. Let me quaff in thy cause, O my God, whatsoever thou didst desire, and send down upon me in thy love all thou didst ordain. By thy glory, I wish only what thou wishest, and cherish what thou cherishest. In thee have I at all times placed my whole trust and confidence. Raise up, I implore thee, O my God, as helpers to this revelation, such as shall be counted worthy of thy name and of thy sovereignty, that they may remember me among thy creatures, and hoist the ensigns of thy victory in thy lands. Potent art thou to do what pleases thee. No God is there but thee, the help in peril, the self-subsisting.
In the name of God, the most ancient, the most great. Indeed, the hearts of the sincere are consumed in the fire of separation. Where is the gleaming of the light of thy countenance, O beloved of the world? Those who are near unto thee have been abandoned in the darkness of desolation. Where is the shining of the morn of thy reunion, O desire of the world? The bodies of thy chosen ones lie quivering on distant sands. Where is the ocean of thy presence, O enchanter of the world? Longing hands are uplifted to the heaven of thy grace and generosity. Where are the rains of thy bestowal, O answerer of the world? The infidels have arisen in tyranny on every hand. Where is the compelling power of thine ordaining pen, O conqueror of the world? The barking of dogs is loud on every side. Where is the lion of the forest of thy might, O chastiser of the world? Coldness hath gripped all mankind. Where is the warmth of thy love, O fire of the world? Calamity hath reached its height. Where are the signs of thy succor, O salvation of the world? Darkness hath enveloped most of the peoples. Where is the brightness of thy splendor, O radiance of the world? The necks of men are stretched out in malice. Where are the swords of thy vengeance, O destroyer of the world? Abasement hath reached its lowest depth. Where are the emblems of thy glory, O glory of the world? Sorrows have afflicted the revealer of thy name, the all-merciful. Where is the joy of the dayspring of thy revelation, O delight of the world? Anguish hath befallen all the peoples of the earth. Where are the ensigns of thy gladness, O joy of the world? Thou seest the dawning place of thy signs, veiled by evil suggestions. Where are the fingers of thy might, O power of the world? Sore thirst hath overcome all men. Where is the river of thy bounty, O mercy of the world? Greed hath made captive all mankind. Where are the embodiments of detachment, O Lord of the world? Thou seest this wrongdoing lonely in exile. Where are the hosts of the heaven of thy command, O sovereign of the world? I have been forsaken in a foreign land. Where are the emblems of thy faithfulness, O trust of the world? The agonies of death have laid hold on all men. Where is the surging of thine ocean of eternal life, O life of the world? The whisperings of Satan have been breathed to every creature. Where is the meteor of thy fire, O light of the world? The drunkenness of passion hath perverted most of mankind. Where are the daysprings of purity, O desire of the world? Thou seest this wronged one veiled in tyranny among the Syrians. Where is the radiance of thy dawning light, O light of the world? Thou seest me forbidden to speak forth. Then from where will spring thy melodies, O nightingale of the world? Most of the people are enwrapped in fancy and idle imaginings. Where are the exponents of thy certitude, O assurance of the world? Bahá is drowning in a sea of tribulation. Where is the ark of thy salvation, O Savior of the world? Thou seest the dayspring of thine utterance in the darkness of creation. Where is the sun of the heaven of thy grace, O light giver of the world? The lamps of truth and purity, of loyalty and honor have been put out. Where are the signs of thine avenging wrath, O mover of the world? Canst thou see any who have championed thyself, or who ponder on what hath befallen him in the pathway of thy love? Now doth my pen halt, O beloved of the world. The branches of the divine low tree lie broken by the onrushing gales of destiny. Where are the banners of thy succor, O champion of the world? This face is hidden in the dust of slander. Where are the breezes of thy compassion, O mercy of the world? The robe of sanctity is sold by the people of deceit. Where is the vesture of thy holiness, O adorner of the world? The sea of grace is stilled for what the hands of men have wrought. Where are the waves of thy bounty, O desire of the world? The door leading to the divine presence is locked with the tyranny of thy foes. Where is the key of thy bestowal, O unlocker of the world? The leaves are yellowed by the poisoning winds of sedition. Where is the downpour of the clouds of thy bounty, O giver of the world? The universe is darkened with the dust of sin. Where are the breezes of thy forgiveness, O forgiver of the world? This youth is lonely in a desolate land. Where is the rain of thy heavenly grace, O bestower of the world? O supreme pen, we have heard thy most sweet call in the eternal realm. Give thou ear unto what the tongue of grandeur uttereth, O wronged one of the world. Were it not for the cold, how would the heat of thy words prevail, O expounder of the world? Were it not for calamity, how would the sun of thy patience shine, O light of the world? Lament not because of the wicked. Thou wert created to bear and endure, O patience of the world. How sweet was thy dawning on the horizon of the covenant, among the stirrers of sedition, and thy yearning after God, O love of the world. By thee the banner of independence was planted on the highest peaks, and the sea of bounty surged, O rapture of the world. By thine aloneness the sun of one is shone, and by thy banishment the land of unity was adorned. Be patient, O thou exile of the world. We have made abasement the garment of glory, and affliction the adornment of thy temple, O pride of the world. Thou seest the hearts are filled with hate, and to overlook is thine, O thou concealer of the sins of the world. When the swords flash, go forward. When the shafts fly, press onward, O thou sacrifice of the world. Thus thou wail, or shall I wail? Rather shall I weep at the fewness of thy champions, O thou who hast caused the wailing of the world. Verily I have heard thy call, O all glorious beloved. And now is the face of Bahá flaming with the heat of tribulation, and with the fire of thy shining word. And he hath risen up in faithfulness at the place of sacrifice, looking toward thy pleasure, O ordainer of the world. O Ali Akbar, thank thy Lord for this tablet, whence thou canst breathe the fragrance of my meekness, and know what hath beset us in the path of God, the adored of all the world. Should all the servants read and ponder this, there shall be kindled in their veins a fire that shall set aflame the world.
No, it only makes you realize more acutely what we were talking about, that we should teach while there's time. It's the only compensation for their sufferings. It's the only salvation for the world. There's nothing else we can do. We can't do anything for them. They could die, but at least we can teach. And Haiti's a very, very fertile field. I remember Ruth Pringle told me, she said, it's I think one reason that I came here before and wanted so much to come to Haiti, and I see how right she was. She told me, she said, you know, Rúhíyyih Khánum, they're not teaching in the villages in Haiti at all. And she said they are wonderful people and very spiritual and have great receptivity. She said, not the cities. They look at the cities and then they don't understand Haiti, but the people of Haiti are wonderful. And we should be teaching them, we should be reaching them. She's absolutely right. You see, the more you get, it's like milk. The more milk you have, the more cream you have. Inevitably, you'll get your leaders. Whatever the percentage may be, 10%, 0.5%, it's there, you see. So that you bring in the friends, and the cream will come to the top. Then you'll have your leaders. You'll have your future teachers, your future administrators, your future staunch Baha'is that will withstand the tests and onslaughts or whatever we all have to stand in the future. Well, I think everybody should go to bed because I know I'm very tired.